How courts typically handle alimony questions. Attorney Kelly Peterson explains, the court must make adequate findings of fact regarding each factor that is considered. The court determines the financial needs of the parties based on evidence submitted at trial. Before awarding alimony, court generally divides property and sets child support first and sets debt because debt plays into ability to pay. The reason for this is that it is difficult to tell what payer's ability to pay will be or recipient's need will be until doing so. If the payer is paying child support to the recipient, the court's calculation will assume that his or her income is reduced by the amount of child support, but will not assume that recipient's income has been increased by that amount. Payers of child support are often surprised that they have to pay spousal support, even though they cannot meet their own obligations. The Bader v. Bader case explains why. Defendant attacks the foregoing requirements as inequitable and as placing an insuperable burden upon him. That it is both burdensome and irksome is not to be denied, particularly if one accepts his figures as to how he must spend his money. However, the trial court is obliged to see the situation with equal concern for the wife and dependent children. This is simply one of those all too frequent situations where the court was confronted with the impossible task of attempting to cut one blanket to cover two beds and satisfy both parties when the truth of the matter is that they cannot afford a divorce, but must have one anyhow. Bader v. Bader, 18 Utah 2D 407, 408, 424, P2D 150, 151, Utah 1967. Sometimes there is no abundant income to divide, so the court does decide to divide pain. In this type of case, the court will create a situation where it realizes that both parties' expenses will exceed their income, but wants each party to fall short by the same amount. The court has enormous discretion in making an alimony award. Because of that discretion, judges' rulings are all over the map on this issue. This can be frustrating to parties because they often cannot predict what will happen. Reasons for alimony. The primary reasons for awarding are to prevent the recipient spouse from becoming a public charge and to equalize the standards of living between the two as much as possible. However, when a marriage was of short duration, the court may choose different goals, such as to rehabilitate a spouse, for example, by getting them through school so they can provide for themselves. The purpose, in the short term, is to close the gap between income so the receiving spouse is better able to support themselves by the time the rehabilitation term ends. Length of alimony. Alimony generally may not last longer than the length of the marriage. Different judicial districts in Utah have different habits. 3rd District judges routinely award for the length of the marriage. 4th District used to rule that way, but more recently, local attorneys have come to expect half the length of the marriage as a starting point. The 4th District is less rigid about awarding it for length of marriage. Alimony terminates generally upon remarriage or death or cohabitation of receiving spouse. Cohabitation means living together in a romantic relation. Modification of spousal support. Spousal support can be modified if there has been a significant change in circumstance that was unforeseen at the time of the original alimony determination. A significant change in payer spouse's life is not a significant change if it could have been contemplated at the time of the divorce. Usually, support can be modified if there has been a vast increase or involuntary decrease of either spouse's income. The court will generally impute what a party has the ability to make, even if he or she chooses not to make this much money. Significant health problems, unforeseen at original determination, can be the basis for modification of alimony. Lump sum alimony. The court has discretion to award a single large payment in a lump sum. This kind of award can be taken from payer spouse's property. The court tends to award lump sums when there will be difficulty in collecting payment. For example, if the payer spouse is moving back to a foreign country or has a historical track record of not making payments.
Call attorney Kelly Peterson in Provo, Utah today. The areas of family law are complex and ever-changing. Kelly Peterson has extensive experience and expertise practicing as a family law attorney in a variety of areas.